Your last years are sacred. Do not allow the noise of the world to fill them with distractions that are not yours.
Protect your peace, cherish your quiet, and let your remaining days be guided by the wisdom you have earned.
There was a moment in my life when I had every right to speak, every reason, every word already formed in my mouth, sharp and ready, like an arrow pulled back on the bow. The truth was on my side. Everyone in that circle knew it. And I opened my mouth, and I said nothing. That silence, that single, deliberate, chosen moment of stillness, changed the direction of everything that came after. Not because I was weak, not because I was afraid, not because I had run out of words. I had plenty of words. I have always had plenty of words. But because I had finally, after decades of living, learned something that no school had ever taught me, that no book had ever fully captured, that no well-meaning person in my life had ever been able to explain in a way I could truly receive. I had learned that the most powerful thing a human being can do is know when not to speak. I want you to stay with me today. I want you to really stay. Not just have this playing in the background while you go about your morning, but truly sit with me, the way people used to sit around fires in the evenings when there was nowhere else to be, and nothing more important than the passing of something real from one heart to another. What I'm about to share with you is not new. It was not invented last year. It was not discovered in a laboratory or published in a journal or sold at a conference. It is old, ancient in fact, as old as the mountains that were standing long before our grandparents drew their first breath, as old as the rivers that do not argue with the stones they encounter. They simply, patiently, find the way around. And they arrive at the sea just the same, always, without fail, without exhaustion, without... You know this feeling, don't you? You have been in a room, maybe at a family gathering, maybe at a dinner table with people you have loved for 40 years, maybe in a quiet conversation with someone who was once your closest friend, and you knew something. You could see it clearly. You understood what was happening beneath the surface of things, what was true, what was right, what was going to unfold, and something inside you burned to say it, to correct the record, to point at the truth and make everyone see it. And maybe you did speak, and it landed like a stone thrown into still water. The ripples spread outward and touched everything, and not all of those ripples were gentle. Or maybe you stayed silent. And that silence sat in your chest like something swallowed wrong, uncomfortable, present, impossible to ignore. I have felt both of those things, many times, and I am here today because I found a third path. Not the path of speaking everything that rises in you, and not the path of swallowing your truth until it turns bitter and begins to color everything you see. There is a third path, the path the elders walked, the path of sacred silence, of chosen stillness, of silence not as absence but as presence, silence not as surrender but as the most refined form of strength available to a human being. By the time we are finished today, I believe something will have shifted in you. Not dramatically. Real shifts rarely announce themselves with fanfare, but quietly. The way the light changes in a room when someone opens a window. You may not even notice it at first. But later, in your next difficult conversation, in the next moment when the pressure rises and the words gather at the back of your throat, you will feel something different. A pause, a breath, a choice where before there was only reflex. That is what I am here to offer you today. My name is not the important thing here. Names, the elders used to remind us, are just the coat we wear in this particular life. What matters is what we carry underneath, the experiences, the losses, the hard-won understandings that cannot be purchased or inherited but only lived through. What I can tell you is this. I grew up in the presence of people who did not learn from books. They learned from rivers and from seasons, from the behavior of birds before a storm, and the way certain trees bend without breaking. They learned from one another, from watching an old woman go still and quiet in the middle of a heated argument and seeing how that quiet spread through the room like wood smoke, slow and pervasive, until everyone stopped speaking without quite understanding why. They read the world the way others read pages, and what they understood about human beings, about the way we wound each other and heal each other and sometimes do both in the same breath, was deeper than anything I have encountered since. I was not always patient. I need you to know that. I was not born with the stillness I am describing to you now. For most of my adult life, I was exactly like many of you, someone who believed with genuine conviction that truth deserved to be spoken. That silence in the face of wrongness was a form of complicity, that if I saw something clearly, it was not just my right, but my responsibility to say so. I argued with my children when their choices frightened me. I corrected my friends when they misremembered things we had experienced together. I insisted, quietly, always politely but persistently, on having the last word in conversations that had long since exhausted their usefulness. I told myself I was being honest, I was being direct. I was honoring the truth by refusing to let it go unspoken, but what I was really doing, I understand now, was confusing the truth with my need to deliver it. Those are not the same thing, and the difference between them, once you can feel it, changes everything. One winter, I must have been in my mid-50s, I was sitting beside a fire with an elder woman I had known for many years. We had been in some discussion, the subject of which I cannot even recall now, which tells you something about how necessary it actually was. And I had made my point, completely, logically, with evidence. I was right, and I knew I was right, and I had made sure that was clear. She looked at me for a long time before she spoke. Her eyes had seen at least 80 winters, and they held the particular quality of vision that comes to people who have truly paid attention to their lives. And she said, "You speak like a river that believes it must move every stone in its path. But the wisest rivers do not fight the stones. They find the way around, and they arrive at the sea just the same." I did not answer. For once in my life, I did not have an answer. I sat with that image, the river, the stones, the sea always waiting at the end, and I felt something in my chest loosen, not collapse, not surrender. Something more like the releasing of a grip I had not known I was holding. I have been sitting with that image ever since, and today I want to place it in your hands, because I believe that many of you, especially those of you who have walked this earth for 6 decades or more, carry within you a lifetime of genuine wisdom, hard-earned understanding, the kind of knowledge that can only come from having lived through things, from having made the mistakes and survived them, from having loved people and lost people and kept going anyway. That knowledge is sacred. It is one of the great gifts that age at its best bestows. But sometimes, and I offer this with deep respect for everything you have lived through, that knowledge begins to feel like a burden we carry into every room, a torch we feel obligated to hold up in every dark corner, even when the people around us are not ready to see by its light, even when they have not asked for illumination, even when our offering of truth, however well-intentioned, lands in the room as judgment. Today I want to offer you a different relationship with what you know, not less truth, not less integrity, not less honesty, but a deeper, more discerning understanding of when to speak and when to be still, when your words are genuinely needed and when your silence is the more powerful gift. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really allow yourself to feel the answer before you respond to it in your mind. When was the last time you said something? Something completely true, something you had every moral and logical right to say, and it made everything worse? Not better, worse. When was the last time your truth created distance rather than connection, friction rather than understanding? A silence afterward that was cold rather than peaceful. I'm going to guess it was not as long ago as you might wish. Perhaps it was with an adult child, someone you raised, someone you know in ways they cannot yet know themselves, who made a decision that worried you. You tried to explain your concern. Maybe you tried several times, in several different ways, and each time you could feel them pulling back, not because they did not hear you, but precisely because they did. Because every word you spoke, however carefully chosen, carried underneath it a message they were not ready to receive, that you did not fully trust them to figure this out. Perhaps it was with a grandchild. You watched them make a choice, about a friendship, about a path, about something that seemed to you obviously unwise, and you said what you saw. And instead of gratitude, what came back was a kind of closing, a door that had been open going gently, quietly shut. And you stood on the other side of it wondering how honesty had produced that result. Perhaps it was with a sibling you have known your entire life, or a friend of 30 years, or a neighbor you have shared a fence with for 2 decades, someone who said something slightly inaccurate, at a dinner table, in front of others, and you could not let it pass. Not because it mattered enormously, but because it was not right and you knew it was not right, and leaving it uncorrected felt somehow like agreeing with it. And afterward, driving home or lying in bed that night, you replayed it. You thought, I was right. What I said was true, and yet something had shifted between you. Some small, barely perceptible thing had changed in the air of that relationship, and you were not entirely sure how to change it back. These moments do not happen because you are unkind. They do not happen because you are arrogant or controlling or difficult. They happen because you are a human being who has lived long enough to know things. And knowing things, genuinely, deeply knowing things from experience rather than theory, creates a very specific kind of pressure. The pressure to speak, to share, to offer the shortcut that your hard-won wisdom could provide, if only the other person would accept it. There is nothing corrupt in that impulse. At its core, it comes from love, from genuine care, from the desire to protect the people around you from mistakes you have already made, from pain you have already survived, from the long and expensive lessons you had to learn without anyone to guide you. You want to give them what you did not have. That is a beautiful thing. It is one of the most human things there is. But here is what I spent years learning, sitting beside people who had lived far longer and far more deliberately than I had. The desire to speak is not always the same as the wisdom to speak. There is a difference, a crucial, life-altering difference, between truth that heals and truth that merely needs an audience, between words that build something between you and another person, and words that simply win an argument while leaving a relationship quietly diminished, between speaking from genuine service to the other person and speaking from the discomfort of holding knowledge that feels too heavy to carry alone, and learning to sit still in the space between knowing something and saying it, to breathe in that space, to feel into it, to ask yourself with genuine honesty which kind of speaking this would be. That is one of the great disciplines of a long and peaceful life. Among the people I learned from, there was a deep and serious understanding that words carry weight. Not poetic weight, not metaphorical weight, real, physical, spiritual weight. Words once spoken cannot be gathered back. They fly where they fly. They land where they land. They take root in whatever soil is waiting to receive them, and they grow into whatever the conditions of that soil allow. Sometimes that growth is healing, sometimes it is not. The elders I sat with were extraordinarily careful about this. They did not speak casually in important moments. Before a difficult conversation, they would often sit in silence for a long time, not preparing arguments, not rehearsing points, but genuinely listening inward for whether the words they carried were meant to be given now, to this person, in this moment. They treated speech as a kind of medicine, and like all medicine, the dosage and timing mattered as much as the substance itself. I have seen families, whole, loving, genuinely devoted families, fractured not by cruelty or deception, but by honesty offered at the wrong moment, in the wrong tone, to a person who was not ready and did not ask. I have seen friendships that spanned half a century end, not over a betrayal, but over a truth delivered without mercy, without the padding of compassion that transforms hard things from projectiles into offerings. I have sat with elders, brilliant, warm, deeply experienced people with so much genuine wisdom to share, who were slowly, almost invisibly becoming isolated in their final years. Not because their families did not love them, but because every gathering, every phone call, every casual visit had begun to carry the weight of a lecture. Every conversation held the possibility of correction. And the younger people in their lives, not out of disrespect, but out of a kind of quiet exhaustion, had started avoiding the depth of real contact, keeping conversations light, steering away from anything that might become a lesson they had not requested. And the tragedy of that, the real heartbreak, was that those elders had everything worth receiving. Everything. Their experience was genuine, their love was real, their understanding ran deep and clear. But it came wrapped in a compulsion to be heard that made genuine hearing nearly impossible. I am not telling you this to frighten you. I am telling you this because I believe you deserve to know, because you still have time, because the choice between being someone whose presence others seek out and someone whose presence others endure is still entirely within your reach. And it hinges, more than on almost anything else, on what you do with the moments when you know something, and the question arises, do I say this, or do I let it be? Now let us walk through the 7 moments together. The 7 specific situations where silence is not merely acceptable, where it is in fact the most powerful, most loving, most dignified response available to you. There is an old teaching I received about the difference between a wound that needs to be cleaned and a wound that needs simply to be left alone. Sometimes, and this is true and it is important, the most loving thing is to say the hard thing, to clean the wound even though cleaning it causes pain, because leaving it uncleaned would allow infection to set in. There are moments when difficult truth is genuine medicine, and withholding it is not kindness, but avoidance dressed in kindness's clothing. But there are also moments when speaking is not cleaning the wound at all. It is reopening one that had already begun to close. I knew a woman, a grandmother, careful and intelligent and deeply loving, who learned that her daughter-in-law had said something unkind about her to a friend they shared. Something small, honestly. Something petty. In the full landscape of their relationship, across all the years they had navigated together, it was a small thing. But she knew it now, and knowing it, she felt it every time they sat across from each other at family gatherings. She felt it pressing against the inside of her lips, asking to be released. She came to me and asked, should she say something? I asked her first to sit with the question, not to answer it immediately. And then, after some silence, I asked her, what would actually change if she said it? She thought about it carefully, truly carefully, not defensively, and after a while she said, I would feel lighter for maybe 10 minutes, and then everything between us would be more complicated for the next 10 years, and every family occasion would carry that conversation like a shadow. She never said anything. The relationship was not transformed into something perfect. It was what it was, with its limitations and its small frictions. But the family remained whole. The grandchildren continued to move freely between both women without navigating invisible tension. The dinners stayed warm. Silence in that moment was not passive. It was a choice that protected something far more important than being heard. Before you speak the difficult thing, ask yourself honestly, is this truth I am offering genuinely for the other person? Or is it for me? To feel lighter, to feel vindicated, to feel less alone with something heavy. Both of those are human, but only one of them is a gift. You cannot pour water into a closed vessel. This is something the elders said in various forms, in various contexts, always with the same patient certainty of people who had tested the principle many times. You can have the clearest water imaginable, clean, cold, genuinely nourishing. And if the vessel is sealed, the water simply falls away, and you are left wet-handed, and the other person is exactly as thirsty as before. You can be right, completely, perfectly, irreversibly right. And if the person across from you is closed, if they are in pain or in pride or in the middle of their own story that they have not yet finished living, your words will not enter them. They will land on the surface and slide off. And sometimes, this is the part that costs people, speaking truth to someone who is not ready to receive it actually closes them further. It takes what might have been an eventual opening and replaces it with a wall. Because they are no longer responding to your words, they are responding to the feeling that you do not trust them to find their own way. I have watched parents, good parents, genuinely wise and loving parents, watch their adult children move toward painful mistakes in slow motion. And every word the parents offered, however carefully framed, however gently delivered, pushed the child one step further in the direction the parents feared. Because the child was not actually processing the content of the words, they were processing the subtext. You are not capable of navigating this without me. And that subtext, even when completely unintended, creates resistance that no amount of wisdom can dissolve. Sometimes the most profound act of respect you can offer another person, especially someone you love, is to trust that they have within them what they need to find their way, and to make absolutely clear through your warmth, your continued presence, your open and unjudging availability, that when they are ready, when the vessel opens as it often does, you will be there, and what you carry will still be there too. Plant yourself like a steady tree at the edge of their path, not blocking the way forward, not calling after them as they go, just there, rooted, offering shade when shade is wanted. Before I share the next teaching, one quick thing. Everything I have been preserving from these old ways, the lessons about silence, aging, inner peace, loneliness, and the things the modern world slowly made people forget. I have written it all down, gathered the way the elders once passed wisdom from one generation to another. It is called The Last Teachings, 60 pages, written not as a book of theories but as a conversation, the kind of conversation you might have sitting beside someone you trust, with no hurry and no agenda. Just the slow, careful passing of something real from one pair of hands to another. Inside, you will find teachings that go deeper than what I can share in a single video. Teachings about how to age with dignity in a world that does not always honor age. About how to release the weight of resentment before it shortens your life. About how to recognize who truly belongs in your inner circle, and how to let go with love and without bitterness of those who do not. If what I am sharing today is landing somewhere real inside you, the book will take you further. But for now, let us continue. The third moment, when arguing the truth no longer serves it. Some conversations have genuine purpose. Something moves in them. You go in holding one thing, the other person goes in holding something else, and you emerge, both of you, with something neither of you carried when you entered. Understanding, if not agreement. Clarity, if not resolution. A sense of the other person as a full human being whose experience has shaped a perspective different from yours. Those conversations are worth having, even when they are hard, even when they cost something. But there is another kind of conversation. And after 60 years of life, you know it when you are in it. You have been in it many times. It is the conversation that is not actually a conversation at all. It is a ritual, a repeated performance of positions that both people have occupied for years, spoken in words that have been spoken before, arriving at a destination that has never once changed. You have had this conversation with a sibling, perhaps, or an old friend or a partner, and both of you know at some level that this is not going anywhere, and yet something compels the performance to continue. When you find yourself in that ritual, truly find yourself there without pretending it is something else, the most dignified and honest thing you can do is simply stop, not in a cold, punishing, demonstrative way, not in a way that announces itself as a kind of winning, but quietly, gently, the way a fire dies down when you stop feeding it. The truth does not need your exhaustion to survive. The truth will still be true whether you defend it for another hour or walk quietly away and make yourself a cup of something warm and let the afternoon settle around you. There is a moment in every unnecessary argument, you can learn to feel it, where continuing is no longer about the truth at all. It is about something else entirely, about not wanting to feel unheard, about pride, about the fear that stopping will be interpreted as conceding, about the particular discomfort of leaving something unresolved when resolution has been unavailable for years. The elders I knew had a phrase for winning an argument that changes nothing. They called it expensive nothing. All the cost of conflict, none of the benefit of genuine exchange. Walk away whole. The truth will still be standing when you return to it. It does not need a defender. It only needs time. For the fourth moment, when words can feed the fire. Fire understands something that human beings sometimes forget, or choose to forget in the heat of a moment. It grows by being fed. Conflict has the same nature. Every word added to an already heated exchange is a piece of wood placed on a fire that was already burning without your help. And there is a tipping point. Every one of you has felt it from both sides, where the fire is no longer about the thing that started it. It has grown beyond that. It has taken on a life of its own, fed by pride and old grievances and the particular human inability to back down from a position once it has been publicly taken. When you sense that tipping point approaching, when the temperature is rising and voices are hardening and faces are closing, and the words coming back at you have stopped engaging with your words and started simply returning fire, that is the precise moment to become still. Not to give up, not to signal defeat, not to do it in a pointed theatrical way that communicates, I am being the bigger person here and I want you to notice, but genuinely, quietly, as an act of care, both for the relationship and for yourself, to stop feeding the fire. One of the most remarkable things I have witnessed over many years of sitting with people in difficult moments is what happens to a heated exchange when one person simply, genuinely, goes quiet. The silence they introduce breaks the rhythm. It removes the wall that the other person's words were pushing against. It creates, in the space where the argument was, a kind of opening that did not exist a moment before. It is extraordinarily difficult to argue with someone who has stopped arguing. The anger has nowhere to land. It has to go somewhere. And usually, after a moment of confused momentum, it turns inward. And sometimes, in that turning, something softer emerges. Your silence is not the white flag. It is the act of someone who has decided that this relationship is worth more than this moment. The fifth moment. When your energy must be protected. I want you to feel this one in your body as I say it, not just hear it with your mind. You are not the person you were at 35. This is not a criticism. It is simply a fact of being human, the specific, irreversible, and actually quite beautiful fact of having lived long enough to accumulate everything that living accumulates. Your energy, the deep, sustaining, irreplaceable energy that fuels your clarity, your health, your capacity for joy, your ability to be genuinely present for the people and experiences that matter, is finite. It is a resource. And like all resources, it can be depleted. Every argument you engage in takes something from that reserve. Every confrontation in which you are trying to be heard by someone who has decided not to hear you, every instance of pouring yourself into a vessel that is sealed against you, costs you something real, something that does not fully restore overnight the way it once did. The elders spoke about this in the language they had available to them. They said that every word leaving your mouth carries a piece of your breath, and your breath is your life. That image is not merely poetic. It is pointing at something physiologically, neurologically, spiritually real. Unresolved conflict lives in the body. Chronic frustration of the kind that comes from repeatedly fighting to be heard ages you in ways that go beyond the metaphorical. You have permission today, ancient permission, earned permission, to stop spending that energy on people and situations that return nothing but depletion. There will be people in your life who seem constitutionally unable to encounter you without generating friction. Conversations with them leave you agitated in a way that lingers for hours. You replay them. You compose the better responses you did not give. You feel the residue of that encounter in your sleep, in your appetite, in the particular quality of the next morning. And you keep engaging. Perhaps because you feel that to stop engaging would be to let something false stand, or to concede something you cannot afford to concede. But I want to ask you, what is actually being protected by that ongoing engagement? What has it produced across all the times you have had these exchanges? Has it moved the needle even slightly? Has it brought you closer? Has it resolved anything? Or has it simply cost you time and energy and sleep and peace minus in exchange for nothing but the feeling, brief and unsatisfying, of having had your say? Protect your fire. Tend it carefully. Reserve it for the people and the moments that can receive it, and return something. For the grandchild who sits beside you and wants to hear what you lived through. For the friend who calls in genuine need and for whom your steadiness is the thing that holds them. For the long morning walk, the good book, the meal eaten slowly with someone you love. For the quiet hour that is entirely your own. These things need your energy. They deserve it. Do not send it where it cannot grow. The sixth moment. When example speaks more clearly than words. There was an elder I knew for many years who never, not once in my memory of him, told a young person what to do with their life. He did not lecture. He did not offer unsolicited guidance. When the young people in his community came to him, and they came often more than they came to the more vocal elders, he listened. He asked a few quiet questions, almost always questions rather than statements. And then, most of the time, he simply returned to what he was doing. His garden, a piece of wood he was working, the slow, unhurried movement through his days that had a quality of attention you could feel simply by being near him. He never announced his values. He lived them visibly, consistently, without performance and without exception. His patience was not something he talked about. It was something you absorbed by spending time with him, the way you absorb warmth from sitting near a good fire. His honesty, his gentleness with difficult things, his refusal to be hurried or pulled into drama, these were not teachings he delivered. They were simply the air around him, and the young people in that community modeled themselves on him more than on any other elder. Not because he told them to, not because he made himself available for that purpose, but because what he was could not be missed, and what could not be missed could not help but teach. There is a truth older than language that the elders understood in their bones. The life you are living is always speaking. Whether your mouth is open or closed, your way of moving through the world is delivering a continuous, unedited message about what you believe and what you value and what is possible in a human life. When you have genuinely lived something, when your integrity and your endurance and your grace under difficulty are visible in how you actually behave day after day, your presence in a room carries a weight that no speech can replicate. You do not need to add words to it. You do not need to explain it or draw attention to it. The next time you feel the urgency to tell someone how to live, especially someone younger, someone you love, someone whose mistakes you can see coming before they can, pause and ask yourself, is my life already saying this? Is the way I have lived and am living already the teaching? And if it is, trust it. Trust the instruction that lives in your example. It reaches further than your words ever could, and it stays long after your words have been forgotten. The seventh moment, when life itself will deliver the lesson. This last one asks something particular of you. It asks for a kind of trust that does not come easily to people who have spent their lives being responsible, being attentive, being the one who sees things coming and tries to prevent the damage. The trust I am speaking of is this. Truth does not need a guardian. It does not need you to stand over it and defend it and make sure everyone acknowledges it. It has been doing fine without your protection for longer than any of us has been alive, and it will continue to do fine long after we are gone. There will be moments, there will continue to be moments, for as long as you are paying attention, when you can see clearly how a situation is going to unfold, when you can recognize a pattern that others around you have not yet noticed, when you know with the particular certainty of hard-won experience what is coming, and the desire to say it is strong. I see where this is going. This is not going to end well. I have seen this before. The desire to be on record, to have been the one who warned, to not be invisible in the unfolding. That is a very human desire, and I do not ask you to pretend it is not there, but consider what happens when you wait. When you hold what you know quietly, and let time move at its own pace. Often, not always but often, life delivers the lesson on its own. Without your intervention, without the cost to the relationship of having been the one who warned, without the damage that comes from being right in a way that requires someone else to be publicly wrong. And when that happens, when life itself confirms what you knew in silence, something interesting occurs. The person who lived the experience does not feel corrected by you. They feel arrived at by themselves. And that is a very different thing. Conclusions we reach ourselves have a completely different quality than conclusions we are delivered by someone else. They take root differently. They last. This is perhaps the most mature form of silence there is. Not the silence of suppression, not the silence of someone biting their tongue, but the silence of someone who trusts deeply in the intelligence of life, in the capacity of others to learn, in the patient willingness of truth to make itself known without any help. Practice it. Sit with what you know. Let it be yours, quietly, privately, without needing to make it anyone else's yet. And watch what unfolds. I want you to take a breath, a real one. Let it come all the way in, and let it go all the way out. And as you breathe, I want you to allow yourself to imagine, truly and specifically imagine, what your days might begin to feel like if you released the weight of needing to be heard in every room. Imagine arriving at a family gathering and feeling genuinely light. Not because nothing bothers you, you are not being asked to stop seeing clearly, but because you have made a real and lasting peace with the fact that not every truth requires your voice in this moment, to this person, at this table. Imagine sitting across from someone who is telling a story slightly wrong, a story you know the true version of, and feeling inside yourself not the tight, contained discomfort of someone biting their tongue, but something much more like gentle amusement. The warm, quiet recognition that this moment does not need you to correct it. That the story being slightly wrong changes nothing of real importance. That you can simply be present and let the evening be what it is. Imagine lying down at night without the residue of a difficult conversation still live in your nervous system. Without the replay. You know the replay, I mean. the one where you go over what was said and said and said again, the one where you compose the better response you did not give, the one that keeps sleep at the edges of the room rather than letting it settle over you. What does that feel like in your body right now as you imagine it? For most people, when they truly allow themselves to sit with that image, what arises is not a sense of loss, not emptiness, not defeat. What arises is spaciousness, room, a kind of quiet openness in the chest that feels like setting down something heavy you have been carrying for so long that you forgot it was a choice. The elders had a phrase for this. They called it traveling light, not because your life becomes smaller or your knowing becomes less, but because you have stopped adding the weight of battles that were costing you more than they were giving you. You have stopped carrying into every room the full armory of everything you know and everything you need everyone to acknowledge. And what remains, what you are without that weight, is actually more present, more warm, more genuinely powerful than you were when you were fighting to be heard. This is available to you, tonight. Not at the end of a long practice, not after years of discipline, not reserved for people with a particular spiritual temperament. In the very next conversation, in the very next moment when you feel that familiar pressure gathering at the back of your throat, that wanting to speak, that needing to be heard, you will have a choice you perhaps did not fully have before today. Pause, breathe, ask, which kind of speaking is this? And in that pause, in that breath, in that question, lives more freedom than most people ever find. If what you heard today has stayed with you, if something, even something small and quiet, has shifted in the way you are thinking about your words, your energy, your peace, I want to make sure you know where to go next. The Last Teachings is there waiting for you. 60 pages written the way I would speak to you if we were sitting together beside the fire, with the evening settling in and nowhere we needed to be, no performance, no rushing, just the slow, careful offering of things I spent years gathering from people who had learned to live fully and peacefully in the final chapters of a life, and who understood that those chapters, when lived with intention, can be the richest of all. Inside, you will find the teaching on chosen solitude, the deep restorative difference between being alone because the world has moved on without you, and being alone because you have learned to genuinely enjoy your own company, to find in your own presence something that does not need constant company to feel whole. You will find the teaching on releasing resentment, not as an act of forgiveness extended to people who perhaps do not deserve it, but as an act of radical self-preservation, as the decision to stop paying, with your own health and your own peace, for things that other people did. You will find the teaching on recognition, how to know, after all the years you have lived and all the relationships you have navigated, who truly belongs in your inner world at this stage, and how to make that recognition without drama, without bitterness, with the kind of quiet clarity that comes from finally knowing yourself well enough to know what you need. And included with it, a bonus teaching called The Secrets of the First Hour, on how the first 60 minutes of your morning, shaped with even a small degree of intention, can alter the entire quality of the day that follows. Small practices, ancient in origin, practical and immediate in their effect. The link is in the first comment below this video. If it calls to you, follow that call. You have nothing to lose and a great deal of peace to gain. We are near the end of our time together now, and I find myself wanting to linger here, not to say more, but because there is something in this particular kind of gathering, even at a distance, even through a screen, that I am reluctant to close. You came here today with something, a question perhaps, or a weariness, or a dim recognition that something in your relationship with words and silence has been costing you more than it should. And I hope, I genuinely hope, that you are leaving with something slightly different. Not answers in the way that answers are usually meant, but a reorientation, a new way of standing in relation to what you know and when you say it. Before I close, let me leave you with something. The oldest woman I ever knew, she was past 80, and her eyes had the quality of someone who had made genuine peace with her entire life, the beautiful parts and the painful parts equally, said something to me once that I have returned to more times than I can count. She said, "The young think that growing older means losing things. And it is true that we lose things, but what we are really losing, if we are paying attention, is the weight we were never supposed to be carrying in the first place. Every year, if we are honest with ourselves, we can become a little lighter, a little more ourselves, a little more free. I have thought about that for many years. I think about the river that does not argue with the stones. That moves around them, between them, through the 1,000 small spaces they leave, unhurried, undefeated, always arriving. The river does not lose anything by moving around a stone. It simply keeps moving. It keeps being what it is. And it arrives always at the sea. You have lived long enough to be that river, to stop spending the precious, irreplaceable energy of your remaining years crashing against stones that are not going to move. Not because the stones are right, not because your truth is less than what it is, but because you have something more valuable than the victory of being right in front of witnesses. You have time, presence, the extraordinary, underestimated power of a person who knows when to speak and when to let the silence do its work. The 7 moments we walked through together today are not commandments. They are not a prescription. They are invitations, offered to you with respect for everything you have lived, with trust in your capacity to feel into each one and know where it lands in your particular life, your particular relationships, your particular ongoing story. In every moment of rising pressure, in every room where the need to speak begins to gather, I hope you will remember that you have a choice, that between the impulse and the word, there lives a breath, and in that breath lives everything. Take the breath, feel the choice, and then, whether you speak or remain silent, do it from wholeness, from the fullness of someone who chose, not from reflex, not from fear, not from the exhausting need to be heard, but from the deep, quiet authority of someone who has lived enough to know the difference. Thank you for your time today. If something here has served you, carry it forward, share it, not to be right, but because that is what the elders always did. They passed the fire forward, carefully from one pair of hands to the next, making sure the warmth reached everyone it could reach before the night grew cold. Be well, travel light, and remember, the most powerful voice in any room is very often the quietest one,